he goes, and he helped fight the Russians, and he kind of paused and like took back a little bit, like, wait, the Russians were our allies. The Russians defeated the Nazis. What? Wait, what? I mean, there are serious historical debates that go on. Who was more imperative in defeating the Nazis? Was it the USA or was it the Russians? And you could argue it was the Russians, and they suffered more loss of life, and it's really not even close. I mean, that's the look of a man who just realized he read a script supporting a Nazi. I mean, that's the look on his face right there. Now, again, you have to understand, the way the Speaker in Parliament works is they're just basically like a robot. They just read it and call it right down the middle. They don't get political at all. They don't show any sides or any favoritism at all. They just go up there and read what they're supposed to read and try to maintain decorum. But, yeah, buddy, you just read a highlight reel for a Nazi. You just read a highlight reel for a Nazi. So let's play it one more time, and then I'll shut up, and you can listen to Canadian Parliament with Vladimir Zelensky giving 2 standing ovations to a literal Nazi. Not a leftist. I accuse everybody I disagree with of being a Nazi. Everybody wearing a red hat is a Nazi. Everybody that waves an American flag is a Nazi, even though it was the Americans and our great-grandfathers that defeated the Nazis, and many of them died, and D-Day and everything. No, not like that. Like a literal Nazi. So here you go. Let's play the whole thing. The Speaker of Parliament realizing that he just read a highlight reel of a Nazi, and then these people give him 2 standing ovations. Go ahead.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians.
Nope.
And continues to support the troops today.
Realize what he read.
Even at his age of 98.
I'm sorry. Pause it again. This is too rich. This is actually hilarious. He realizes what he read. Did you see the reaction there? He realizes what he just read. The Russians were our allies. The Russians defeated the Nazis. I just read a highlight reel supporting a Nazi. You watch his face. First he gets confused, and then he realizes he's like, he fought the Russians, and then his eyebrows perk up, and his head rears back, and he's like, holy smokes, I just read a highlight reel for a Nazi. All right, I promise this is the last time I'm going to play it. This is just too rich to me. This is just too rich to me. He realizes that he just read a script promoting and hyping up a literal Nazi. I mean, folks, we are just in complete clown world. Okay, I'm going to shut my mic off. Here you go. He promotes a Nazi. Canadian Parliament. 2 rounds of applause.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian.
Just watch the face. Just please watch the face. It's priceless.
Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
Yeah, so it goes on forever, and then it's like, you know, this is what they do at like ball games, like a baseball game. A guy hits a 3rd home run or has a big home run, and they do a standing ovation, and then he walks from the dugout, and then they do another standing ovation. It's like, yeah, he's a hero. We want a curtain call. And now they do it for Nazis. Ezra Levant, I thank you for joining us. I know you've got some other stuff going on. I want to give you the floor here because here's some of the headlines in response. Apology demanded after MPs honor man who fought for Nazis. Who is Yaroslav Hunk, ex-Waffen SS member, gets applauded in Canadian Parliament. Trudeau and Zelensky honor 98-year-old veteran who fought alongside Nazis in SS division. All right, we're beyond the pale, total twilight zone. Ezra Levant, your response.
You know, Trudeau calls everyone he doesn't like a Nazi, and yet he is the first Canadian prime minister in history, or first Democratic leader in the world that I know of, that literally invited a Nazi to attend Parliament, and he got a standing ovation. And I'm not talking about a conscripted guy or an enlisted man, you know, low down in the pyramid of the Nazi Wehrmacht. I'm talking about someone who volunteered to be part of the SS. That's the nastiest, most brutal fighting force in the Nazi regime. Those are the folks who would hunt for Jews in the attics. Those are the folks who would shoot people and dump them in a mass grave. That's the Nazi Waffen SS. They actually trained at Dachau. They took orders directly from Germany. And this guy sneaked into Canada about 70 years ago by lying about his past. He said he wasn't with the 14th Waffen the battalion. He was with the 1st Ukrainian battalion. He lied. He faked the name of his group so he could come to Canada. Now, Owen, he lived a quiet life for 70 years, keeping a low profile. Maybe he was worried that some Mossad Nazi hunters would find him, kidnap him, and bring him to Israel for a trial like they did for Adolf Eichmann. So he lives his whole life in Canada. He's 98. There aren't many of these guys left. And then suddenly he gets a phone call from Trudeau's office saying, come on down to Parliament. You're actually a hero. I mean, he's got to be thinking Adolf Hitler would be so proud of me now. And not a single journalist and not a single politician, not a single person in the establishment said, what? If this guy was fighting against the Russians in 43, 44, 45, what side was he on? Because the only people fighting against the Soviet Union then were the Nazis. Imagine the word trickery necessary to get this guy in. And don't tell me that Trudeau didn't know. I heard your analogy with baseball, but this is more like a State of the Union address. When the president calls out this guy in the crowd, an Army veteran calls out that guy in the crowd, you know, a small businessman. They knew exactly who he was. He was vetted. He was their hero. And they just thought they could get away with it. But independent journalists blew the whistle, not the regime media, Owen, independent journalists. You know why? Because the rest of the regime media is in on it.
Yeah, the people that cry Nazi, Nazi, Nazi when someone disagrees with them are now celebrating a literal Nazi. I can't even believe now it's the total boy that cried wolf phenomenon. But you know, if I'm a body language reader, there's two moments that have me extremely intrigued. First of all, you have the speaker there who I think he kind of realizes it. If you watch his face, his eyes perk up and his head goes back. He's like, wait, he fought the Russians? He's like, wait, he fought the Russians? Like, what am I? Wait, is this guy the Nazi? And then the video where he's like wiping his brow of the sweat. It's like all the stress that he's lived under being a Nazi for 70 years. It's like all the stress is now wiped away. He's like, oh, I'm a Nazi all these years, and now it's all relieved.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And, you know, the fact that the Speaker of the House was reading and looked surprised to read goes to the fact that someone wrote that script for him. The reason I mention that is because this Speaker of the House put out a press release today and made a little statement saying, I'm the only one who knew about this. Don't ask any more questions. It definitely wasn't Justin Trudeau. It definitely wasn't Chrystia Freeland, our Deputy Prime Minister, whose own grandfather was a Ukrainian Nazi. I mean, there are some weird Nazi ties in Canada. Justin Trudeau went to Kiev about 3 months ago, and he met with a Nazi apologist that Zelensky himself fired. There was this Ukrainian ambassador who denied the Holocaust, and it was so crazy that Zelensky himself fired this guy. His name is Andrei Melnik. Trudeau met with him after he was fired. What were you doing? And so there's this weird thing where Trudeau calls every conservative he hates a Nazi, but Trudeau can't get enough of these Nazis. And today, when the Speaker of the House fell on his sword and said, hey, everybody, I was the only one who knew. Stop asking questions. I was the guy responsible for this. Don't pick on Trudeau. Really? It was obvious he was reading a speech written for him by someone else. This goes straight to Trudeau, and it's another humiliation for Canada at the hands of Trudeau. I think Canadians are starting to get a little bit tired of this guy.
Well, and I kind of want to hone in on this as well. Ezra Levant with us from Rebel News, rebelnews.com, at Ezra Levant on Twitter. Do you think that Trudeau and his cabinet are just so ignorant that they didn't even realize what they were doing and they thought this would just be like a good promotional stunt for the war in Ukraine?
I do, because remember, he's been going to Ukraine and meeting, for example, with this Andrei Melnik, and he's had no blowback. So I think he thought this will work. It's worked so far. I mentioned the Deputy Prime Minister. Her name is Chrystia Freeland. Her grandfather was actually a Nazi. He expropriated a Jewish newspaper in Ukraine and turned it into a Nazi propaganda rag. Now, I'm not blaming a granddaughter for what her grandfather did.
All right, folks, you can't make this up. Ezra, I'm sorry, we're up against a short break. This is a short break. We got 5 minutes on the other side. Stick with me through this break. Let's hone in on this. Folks, this is Twilight Zone level. I mean, I'm hearing the Twilight Zone music behind me now. Yeah, we should be playing this music when we play that clip from Canadian Parliament where they're celebrating a Nazi, a literal Nazi. It's the boy that cried wolf. I mean, it's also strange, Ezra Levant with us here, rebelnews.com. But talk to me about the backlash here. Obviously, the mainstream media that accuses everybody being a Nazi is not going to be covering this, but the backlash must have been real because the speaker had to issue a statement in a coverage of Justin Trudeau. Are they really this ignorant? Is it all a publicity stunt? I mean, what the hell goes on that leads to this moment?
Well, I mentioned to you a few months ago, Justin Trudeau went to Ukraine and met with a Holocaust denier named Andrei Melnik. And it's not just my accusation that he's a Holocaust denier. He went on TV denying it. It was so awful, Zelensky had to fire him. So imagine meeting with that guy. So Trudeau's meeting with these Holocaust deniers. He's hanging out with these extremist people, and nothing happens. There's no reverberations back home in Canada. So he's thinking, oh, okay, so that's how it is now. I can go further. I can go further. And so on Friday, when Zelensky's in Ottawa, this is Trudeau's big moment. He says, I'm going to show what a guy I am. I'm going to find this one Ukrainian freedom fighter who's actually a Nazi. And I'm going to show what it was a show-off moment for Trudeau. And he almost got away with it, Owen, because at Friday, no one said anything. Saturday, no one said anything. And by no one, I mean there were 338 members of parliament in the room. No one said anything. There were a lot of other guests. In fact, in the video clip, you can see right near this Nazi were Canadian military brass. They surely knew what was going on. They said nothing. Countless journalists were covering this. They said nothing. Trudeau almost got away with it. But then independent journalists, including myself, started putting two and two together. I did a little bit of a tweet storm late Saturday night. I got 3 million impressions on my tweets. There was a professor who got millions, and all these sort of independent people on Twitter. And I started tagging the official anti-Semitic fighters, the anti-Semitic fighters in Canada, saying, where are you with this? How are you okay with this? And I guess so many people online started making this a thing that the dam broke. And a Holocaust memorial group put out a statement, and then another did, and then it just finally the dam broke, but not because of any mainstream media journalists. And that goes to show you that whenever they condemn someone as bigoted or racist or Nazi, they don't actually mean it, because they don't actually care. Because a real life Nazi whose hands are probably covered in blood, when he was there, they didn't say a word because they wanted to protect the precious Justin Trudeau. And it took grassroots independent Twitter journalists to make a difference. So Owen, never, never, never allow the establishment to get away with calling you names, because odds are it's projection. They accuse you of what they are doing themselves.
And thank God for Rebel News and Ezra Levant to be there to push this over the dam. And so, I mean, again, like, this is beyond the pale. What is the breaking point, though, for the Canadian people? I mean, Trudeau is not popular. He was nowhere near winning the popular vote. But, I mean, what is the breaking point? The arresting of journalists, the arresting of pastors, the crushing of dissidents.
Well, I think a couple things are turning. First of all, the economy. Inflation is out of control. Housing prices are skyrocketing. Housing prices are twice as expensive proportionately here as they are in America. Young people just can't buy homes. And Trudeau has doubled immigration in the last year. It's the equivalent of 10 million people a year in America. It's 1 million a year in Canada. We're 1/10 your size. So you've got out of control inflation, unaffordable homes, doubling immigration, and then you've just got scandal after scandal. I think people are getting sick of Mr. Woke. He's like Gavin Newsom. He runs a failed state. Imagine if Gavin Newsom were your president. That's what Trudeau is. Oh, my gosh.
Well, we might not have to imagine. Ezra Levant, at Ezra Levant on Twitter, rebelnews.com. Folks, I'm really appreciative of him joining us. This is how it is in media. He's literally eating his lunch in the break, but he just had to come on with us. It's okay. We respect that, Ezra. We love you. Thank you for joining us on short notice. We're going to be right back with Edward Dowd. I mean, folks, we are just... Trump said it right. Everything woke turns to shit. That's all I can say. That's it. You know, I'm thinking about just letting this siren play for a minute here. Edward Dowd is about to join us because, you know, here's the thing, folks. Donald Trump gets 50,000 people at a rally. Joe Biden gets 50, somehow wins the election. I got speeches from Joe Biden. He can't even